Hi, everybody. I'm very proud and a little bit fidgeting because this session should be moderated by our brilliant Arkady Ostrovsky. Definitely, I'm not Arkady. And I had to replace him. So in a couple of minutes, I'll switch to Russian. But I want to say thank you for this session. And the topic is strategy of the Russian opposition and of the West to communicate with the Russian people and with political and business security elites in Russia. You know, we will start in a minute, but organizers asked me to give them a floor for some administrative ad. Yulia.
Thank you very much for the floor, and thank you all for coming back in time. I have a very quick logistical announcement I would like to make. You have all received two types of badges. The badges for the visitor, please make sure to keep them until tomorrow. Secondly, we all have our conference participant badges, like this. If you have one, please wear it. It helps us control access to the room and ensure security. If you do not have one, we have badges here that have not been picked up. Please come here at any time during the panels today and find yours. If you cannot find yours, come to me, I will help you. This is all. Thank you very much. I wish you a great discussion on this panel.
Thank you. Thank you. And the topic of this session sounds a little bit complicated, but if I could translate it to my very simple language, the topic is how to reach our audience inside Russia, different types of audience, different types of group of people, how to reach them, and what is the strategy, what messages, what ideas we want to share and to accept from them. Maybe we will start. I am now in a, I'm working like a double agent because previously I had to be a speaker, but now I'm moderator and a speaker, but I want to give a floor with the first question to my colleagues. And first I'd like to ask Mr. POMIANOWSKI. You know, many of European NGOs, foundations had been working inside Russia for years. Now, to the civil society, all foreign contacts are toxic. How could we mitigate risks? How could we grow security for those inside Russia who desperately need your information, your support, your funding at least?
Thank you, Galina. Thank you very much for inviting. I will speak English, but if need be, I can answer questions later in Russian. European Endowment for Democracy, of course, is extremely committed to provide support continuously, already for many years, and obviously last year especially, both to independent media, but not only. I will explain later why not only, because this is part of the answer to your question. With regard to security, of course, it is dramatically deteriorated. Just a few years ago, we could have had a support inside Russia. They were less sensitive with regard to the reaction to the authorities, and then it became more and more difficult. We were prepared for it. EED was designed to deal with such a situation. Russia was not the first territory where our support was under enormous monitoring by authorities, employing all kinds of instruments from administrative to the legal procedures to simply harm it and to stigmatize people. So we developed certain strategy to make sure that we can do this in a very discreet way and in a way that protects our partners on the ground. The important part of this support was and is, and this is also an answer to a question, that we were never creating any strategy. Our strategy was to support people who are doing right things. Our strategy was to let media do what they do best, just doing professional media. Our strategy was not even to fight disinformation, because this is obvious, but the strategy is to create and maintain channels of communication. Now, what is the deeper understanding of this communication today? If we listen to a political narrative about communicating to Russia, inside Russia, we are talking about access to truth, access to information. That's not true anymore, and for many years already not true. And experts realize this. Peter Pomerantsev was one of them, who said it's not about truth, it's about trust. People listen only to those whom they trust. And you can build trust not through providing a good information or setting up good newsroom, but to engage with your audience emotionally, engage with hearts and then minds of the people. So this concept of deep emotional engagement was extremely important when we are looking for different initiatives and different type of support to make sure that there is a way to communicate to people beyond the traditional bubble of those who are active and who are looking for independent source of information. That was very important. And at the same time, of course, it became more and more difficult. Nevertheless, we are still continuing. What I would like to mention here, and that is more addressed to the Brussels-based community of policy decision makers, is that still we do not have a special program, I mean a special budget allocation within EU budget that will provide long-term stability for communicating with Russian society, for providing core support to Russian media. This is still absent. There are many ad hocs, very good initiatives. There are many ad hocs allocation of budget, but there is no long and medium-term strategy. This is something that I think, and this is part of my job, to make sure that this message is passing through different activities, whether we address this through the different committees within EU or European Endowment for Democracy publishes certain policy recommendation or advice, or simply through direct talks to different politicians. This is something that we still need to do to be even more efficient than we are.
Thank you so much. May I switch to Russian? But first, before we will discuss this strategy and ideas, I just want to make some definition about who we are talking about. Уважаемый господин Пономарев, мне бы очень хотелось...
Distinguished Mr. Ponomarev, I would like you to somehow describe the audience inside Russia that the leaders of the public opinion should address. I mean, in the West, all the people who represent the media, non-commercial organizations, human rights organizations, who are the audience prior to delivering any ideas or strategies to them. We should define who we are talking to inside Russia. Who are the people? Because the topic of our discussion has the words political business and security elites. And this is what concerns me. Among these people are those that we cannot talk to.
Я по-русски.
I will naturally be speaking in Russian. Our goal is peaceful revolution, peaceful democratic revolution. Our goal is for Russia to become a democracy. There is a question, how to make it happen. There are many talks about what is going on, that this is real fascism, and people who support Putin's power are numerous. Well, maybe it is exaggeration. There are two figures. There is a bubble or the core, like 20% of people, 20% of people, and the Democrats are supported by 20%. 60% are households that live their lives. They can be more for Putin just because it is easier this way, but they would never go to protest. They will never be saying any jokes about Putin because they are afraid. So there's a gigantic problem to reach this audience, these households, ordinary people. Half a year ago, well, I'm from the Sakharov's movement, Peace, Progress and Human Rights. We have already addressed Mr. Kubilius and we discussed it, and I believe that he could hear it, but it's really very difficult to do so. We have to start working on this. I would like to say that we should make an information machine that would broadcast addressing these people, but we should reach them. How? We should make either, well, I was contacted by engineers and they say that we could launch a satellite or something. I'm not deep into technology, but what can be done? There can be a 24/7 on internet channel or some channel working during the daylight. What should be the program? The program should be designed for ordinary people. We have many good information channels, multiple subscribers, millions, and bloggers, but this is our information bubble. And that environment should be different. There should be some series like Netflix refused to broadcast in Russia or to sell it. I don't know how they engineer it, but we could agree with them either to buy the series from them, or maybe they could give some series for free to broadcast. You know how serious are how serials are popular among people, and then talk about democracy, how democracy addresses the key issues of the population: poverty, social protection, and security, labor rights, trade unions, how this is engineered in the West, what are the welfares paid to people, etc. So this is the only, I believe, we can discuss this in detail, but this is the only way that we should take, and we should have done it a long time ago. We have a small portion of people supporting us. Certainly the number of the Democrats that we have will hardly be coming to power peacefully. So this is my answer to this particular question. Thank you very much. Am I getting you right that the main purpose and the purpose of your audience, or your audience, are those 60% of ordinary people? And this is a question to Mr. GOZMAN. There are people in this audience who will never be connected? And we come back to the question of the 90s to illustration. Well, I don't know illustration or not, but there are people who have been committing crimes under the regime, and we can be talking to them only after they serve their sentence, as it seems to me. But the number of these people is scarce. If we answer your question, then in order to find options for successful communications with our co-citizens, we should not repeat, but we should be aware of the mistakes in communication. Look, inefficiency and aggression for the authorities should ensure high status of the opposition. Moreover, among oppositional leaders, there are heroes, the people who admire and inspire many, even those who do not share their views fully. But nevertheless, we do not see this happening. And it's not about the communication channels. There are enough channels. There are political channels, cultural, enlightenment, whatever you want, whatever channels you want. But for some reason, it won't work. I believe it won't work because many people from the opposition, I'm sorry for putting it not in a complimentary way, and this is towards ourselves, but many people from the opposition commit horrible mistakes in communication. And there are a few reasons. I would like to name them. We disturb the dialogue. We rarely address our co-citizens who live in Russia, but we address each other and Western leaders. And this is visible. This is visible. Nobody listens to this, and only a few listen. Next, there is no understanding, and many of us do not have understanding that if one day something turns good, thanks God or God bless, we don't know. If we still live to that day, if we manage to come back, we will be living next to these people who voted for Vladimir Putin, who believe that we have been attacked by NATO, where these people will go. These people will stay in Russia, and there are dozens of millions of people, those who voted for Putin and who believe that we have been attacked by NATO. These are our neighbors in the neighborhood. These are the children of our schoolmates, etc. The opposition addresses their own audience, and sometimes the opposition addresses the enemies with curses, but they never address those who are in between. Almost never. And when they do, they frequently use. They talk from the top to the bottom. They use cursing and insulting metaphors. If you call your compatriots like dumbheads, then maybe you should be maybe you should be doing some other things, because you cannot treat your co-citizens like that. Addressing the majority turns into lecturing. You voted wrongly. You deserved it. You are getting what you wanted. That's the way you talk from top to the bottom. It's like talking of teachers, like lecturing. And the opposition says that, or shows that there is no compassion, there is no sympathy, there is no way to help people to get better. I'm an atheist, but I am referring to St. Paul. If we speak about angel or human words, if I have no love, then I'm just a musical instrument. And if we address our compatriots, if we speak without sympathizing, without love, if we talk from top to the bottom, they will never hear it. Even if we say 2 by 2 is 4, they will say that you always lie, we don't trust you. We cannot be heard if we lecture people, and this is right, and quite often we lecture them. One more thing that disturbs communication is quarrels, public quarrels of public figures, because these quarrels between celebrities are interpreted like the celebrities are concerned about their status but not the interests of the country. This is how it is interpreted. To terminate these disputes or these quarrels is impossible. You can sign any declaration, but this will exist, but you can respond. We can respond to what is said. Now, answering the question about elites, what Galina wondered, this is absolutely wrong. It's a wrong situation. When we declare that all those who somehow cooperated with the Putin's regime, you are guilty, but who has not cooperated with Putin? And then it becomes total nonsense. If you paid the taxes, then you cooperated with the regime. How can you not cooperate with the regime? If your children go to school, you are employed, you cannot but cooperate with the regime. Certainly there are different grades of cooperation. One person just works, another one makes weapons, another one says on TV channels that all Ukrainians should be killed. Liability is different, but if we say that everybody is guilty, well, this means that nobody is guilty, and second, we will never find allies. So we should try to make more friends, not more enemies. And of course, we should say we are ready to cooperate with Putin's elites, who have not cursed themselves by being directly involved in the horrible atrocities committed under the name of our country. And the last thing about communication. You have not asked about that, but our communication with the Western leaders, with the West, which are endlessly important to us. Of course, you know, when we reproach the facts of discrimination under the passport, this is immoral and this is archaic. It's like during the Second World War, people or the enemies of Hitler were pushed out of the countries, and some of the countries would turn these people to Germany. Certainly it is horrible, but when we say something to our Western partners, we should not forget about our duty to be thankful to them. Dear friends, we are all allowed to live here. These are not our countries, this is not our motherland, but we have been allowed. And it seems to me we should not forget that we have been hosted. And let's not forget to say thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And my next question will be to Stefan. And so, what could be the message, the main idea translated from West to Russia, to Russian civil society, to Russian, those neutral or ignorant audience we want to reach?
I think that many things have been said by others. I think the main thing is to remove the regime, to end the war, and other things on the go, starting from today. Of course, it's only possible if we talk to Russians. I would like to say that the Russian society is present in many places. Primarily, of course, in Russia. It's still about 145 million, but there are also millions in other countries, sometimes voluntarily. Now, mostly, it was not their choice to emigrate. They have freshly arrived, or they have been there for years. This is also a part of the Russian society, and this is an important part to count on, because they already now have more freedom. The question how I can bring this together. Galina asked me about the message from the Western society. First of all, our argument should be that we defend universal values. These are not Western values, not Eastern, Northern or Southern, that these are values for everyone. And the fact that we define ourselves as the West, we also exclude the people who live to the East, which doesn't help. We have to speak about the universal nature. And this conference was opened by Andres Kubilius today, that of course we believe that democracy is possible in Russia, and it's necessary. It's not only a chance, it's a task, it's almost a duty. First of all, the duty towards Ukraine, and also to the people in Russia. What is the message? I think that both the common people and the elites must be told that anti-Russian position is now held by the regime and by Putin, which is the most anti-Russian position possible. The leadership of Russia holds this position, and I think we have to disseminate this idea. So the pro-Russian position is what many people in this room defend. These are the human rights, diversity and democracy, good neighborhood, equal rights of countries. And peace with neighbors. The end of repression. This is the pro-Russian position, which is also pro-Ukrainian. We have to keep repeating. Don't avoid the topic of the war. Don't be silent on it. Wherever you are. This is also the Russian task. And also for good neighborhood in the future, it's also a part of integration into Europe. The last thing I want to say, We of course understand that now it's much more difficult for people in Russia to speak openly. We have to respect them, the people who can do this, who are brave enough to do this, and we have to fight for them individually, for everyone. And it's also very important for us to show these role models, because this is courage, this is civil position. As someone coming from the east, from Eastern Germany, I also have seen such situations, although it was not the time of war, but in GDR, many people were against the Soviet regime, about 20%. About 15 or 20% believed that the socialism is superb, and also there were so many people who saw all the weaknesses, but they preferred to stay silent on it, so they would find their niche. This is quite a typical picture for a society. It shouldn't surprise us, but we should and can motivate people. It of course means that we also have to go to the space, so to say, to odnoklasniki and VKontakte social media, not only to stay in our media. I'm sitting next to Galina, who produces very important programs on Meduza, and many people in this room also offer their media information, but it's not enough, because so far we can't reach out to the silent majority. And what defines us is whether we're giving some idea to people in Russia how they can get out of their situation. They are also in a situation of hostages, quite to a large degree, and this is what was said. Of course, we need an international tribunal, public tribunal based on international law, with participation of a Ukrainian judge, but it will not apply to all 140 million of Russians, and they must understand this, so that they are not afraid to join us again. Actually, they are the majority, and they are not under threat, but this should be only a threat to those who created this regime, to those who are waging this war, who have really, whose hands are in blood, in Russia, in Ukraine, and also in many other countries. And this is also a message that we remember them, all the other countries, because what we want is, of course, the joint European space where everyone is equal. We all care, and we are all equal, and if we manage to do this, we will also overcome the imperialism. Thank you.
I want to express support to the words of Mr. GOZMAN that communication is the matter of trust. So we have to communicate we have to deliver these ideas through our trusted persons, through opinion makers. And who do you think are those peoples? Who could be, should be speakers whom Russian audience may trust?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and just to be to maybe introduce myself to understand where I come from. I work at the European External Action Service. I'm a director for strategic communication, and from the ES, we must say that the war has really forced us, not only as ES, but the whole EU, to fundamentally rethink completely our communication to Russian audiences. So we were doing things, of course, we were talking to Russian audiences, but the new context has made us rethink. In this endeavor, we have mobilized new communication approaches, formats, resources, to continue this work. And also, we have thought not only of Russian audiences, but also Russian audiences in Russia, but of course of Russian audiences in Europe and in the world. And first, on working on Russian audiences, but it has been said before, we in our audience research are really conscious that many Russians do not actively support the war against Ukraine, even if they do not publicly express their opinion on this. And we are well aware of the many anti-war initiatives in Russia and the brave citizens who take risks trying to end this war. So how are we working? We have maintained our public diplomacy program for Russia, and these programs, and that's how we work with opinion leaders, to get to your question. We work with EU and exiled Russian researchers, scientists, cultural figures, journalists, and other stakeholders. And we are, in fact, working to maintain those links between actors of similar speciality who can talk to each other, know how they, in their own domain, how they can talk also about democracy issue, the war, and what is their role as elite in the cultural research or other field. So that is very important. That is an important area of our work. But we also do support the strategic work of Russian civil society and independent media, who are, of course, also opinion leaders and multipliers through different support measures. And this, in fact, complements an active dialogue that we have with independent media and civil society representatives, and not least those forced to leave Russia. And we are now working to make this more sustainable in the long term. But in addition, we reach out to opinion leaders through our EU delegation to reach the Russian public from our EU delegation in Moscow on a daily basis. The delegation works on offline events this year to continue engaging with Russians who are interested in maintaining a connection with Europe. And finally, as we see that the internal repression in Russia is has aggravated with the external aggression, the challenge now for the Russian democratic forces, both civil society and independent media, will be to maintain its impact on relevance for the Russian society inside the country. So what we are doing is we will continue to support the Russian democratic forces to keep their network of contributors and partners on the ground, and to focus on local issues and to reach out to new audiences.
Thank you. And let me continue with Mr. Pizzula. It seems to me that Europe and members of European Parliament very often realize themselves in a very difficult position, because sometimes Russian opposition ideas or strategy come to the contrary with so-called Ukrainian agenda, you know, and speaking about sharing one floor with Ukrainian speaker, it's almost always it's a problem to gather on the one floor at one stage Ukrainian activists and Russian opposition leaders. And what is the policy towards these attempts to organize joint conversation?
First of all, thank you for inviting me here, and please feel more than welcome in the European Parliament, House of Representatives of 450 million European citizens. And despite our, let's say, significant political differences in the European Parliament, I can assure you that most of the parliamentarians are very vocal to examine what we can do as parliamentarians to push for a meaningful dialogue about the current situation which hit hardly European continent since Putin invaded Ukraine 24th February last year. Of course, for us, it's in a way, for most of the people, it's a relatively new experience, how to deal with a war and how to, let's say, give our fair share to stop atrocities and how to maybe clear terrain for some kind of the talks, which are inevitable. And it's not an easy thing to do, I can tell you. Let me share with you some of my experience, because I'm coming from the newest member states of the European Union, Croatia. 1st of July will be exactly 10 years since Republic of Croatia became a member of European Union. Unfortunately, it's my personal belief, we need to wait at least next 6, 7, maybe 10 years when a new flag will be erected on the mast in the front of European Parliament building. Despite that fact that European Union will not enlarge soon, it must not remain a closed project. And in order to secure that, we need to do utmost anything, first of all, to spread not our territory, more territory, to become part of the European Union. It's important for the European Union to expand its virtues, values, which are at the heart of the European project. I keep telling journalists and people in Croatia that it's important to withdraw money for the European funds, but it's even more important to withdraw and implement values, core values of the European project in society. And if you ask me about this dialogue in a way, I think that it would be wise to stick with the European values when we plan that type of the debate. Because if you check European Union itself, it's a regional peace project, which had started 70 years ago, combining efforts of only 6 European countries. First of all, Germany and France. And it's a fun fact that the 5 or 6 founding fathers of the European project, some of them were Italians, French, and German, everyone spoke German. And before English dominance, they spoke each other in the German language, a language of the country which had been defeated righteously 2 times in the 20th centuries because jeopardized world peace and caused atrocities and suffering. And if we plan what is our next move, let me say there is some kind of the fear I can feel in political elite in the Europe. Of course, we would like all to see Mr. Putin's gone, to, let's say, get rid of Mr. Putin. But there is a certain fear what Russia will look like day after Mr. Putin will leave a position in Kremlin. And that's important to talk here about your visions. How do you see a country? Because, again, my Croatian, if you want, my Yugoslav experience tells me that it's much easier, not easy, of course, but much easier to get rid of the dictator himself than to eradicate, get rid of the circumstances which had led to dictatorship itself. It's a hell of the job. And Russia is a great and important country. And it's not easy to plan and to, let's say, cope with the post-Putin Russia. But you need to do right now, you need to plan it right now. And finally, just one remark. Let's talk about fake news and disinformation, which is a backbone of many autocratic and dictatorship regimes. I invested some effort and organized 2 projects in Croatia in order to depict fake news creating process and disinformation. And many research showed that elderly people, they are keen to disseminate 7 times more fake news, disinformation, than the younger people. So who's your targeted audience? Of course, young people, because future belongs to them. But if you want to affect tomorrow, immediate future, let's talk about how to tackle, how to approach to the elderly people and how to convince them that they need to secure a better future for the younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you. And it seems to me that we have Mr. SIMAKOVSKY online. Is it here? Yeah? No? Not yet. Not yet. Okay.
He is online and ready to connect. So whenever you give him the floor.
Will you please connect us? Thank you. Hi. Do you hear us? Mark?
You're online.
You're online.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. My question is for you especially, that any strategy and any efforts should be properly funded. And are international organizations ready? And what is time and funding limits for funding such initiatives as dialogue, as delivering ideas and strategy to civil society inside Russia?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you perfectly well.
Great. Thank you again, Ms. Timchenko, and thank you to the organizers. I want to, in particular, thank Andris Kubilius and Natalia Arno for the invitation to participate in this panel, and of course for the tireless work that you and others within all of your organizations are doing to establish a dialogue between democratic governments and Russia's civil society activists and independent voices. I see such an incredible group that's focused on facilitating and frankly sparking a real dialogue about how we can support Russian civil society and those seeking a democratic future for Russia. And I'm proud to participate and work on these issues here at USAID in Washington. Last week, I traveled to Lithuania, where I was able to meet in person with such activists and journalists, many of which are represented in this room. And frankly, the visit was very important for me and for USAID. I was able to see firsthand the incredible dedication and bravery and, of course, the perseverance of the exile community. It helped me better understand the plight of this very vulnerable group, their efforts, what they're doing, of course, many of which are doing outside of Russia. And I came away with an even firmer belief in how important the work is to have a more open and peaceful future for Russia. This dialogue and, again, seeing the plight of so many Russians in Lithuania is very important to me personally. In many ways, my family and I are also Russian exiles with my own parents' immigration from the Soviet Union in the mid-1970s. So seeing the ability for Russian exile community to have a home outside of Russia is something that's very important. And of course, the EU is playing such a critical role with member states hosting thousands of Russians that are, of course, vulnerable as a result of Putin's aggression in Ukraine. I want to start also by reinforcing a key message that USAID Administrator Samantha Power delivered in remarks in Washington earlier this year. And she said that Putin does not speak for all Russians, and USAID will seek to support all those impacted by Putin's aggression, including those Russians that have been forced to flee their homeland as a result of Russia's increased oppression. And I just want to reinforce that as USAID works diligently to support those impacted in Ukraine by Russia's war of aggression. We also have a strategic approach to support all those impacted by Putin's aggression, including those Russians that have left the country. We've seen hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens voting with their feet following the Kremlin's full-scale war against Ukraine, and of course the mobilization of citizens for service in the army. As the administrator said, we at USAID will continue to support efforts to build up Russia's civil society and independent media, including for those of you who are located outside of Russia. This is a key USAID priority. It's something that we have done, and we will continue to do as this group's vulnerability increases. Many of us within the U.S. government fully recognize that the international community must stand up for human rights and freedom in Russia. We also recognize the critical role that all of you as members of the Russian exile community, all of the role that all of you play in advancing those values. Putin's strategy has been to isolate, it has been to intimidate individuals such as yourselves, and finally also, of course, to erode the connections that allow organizations to work together to achieve greater impact. And this, of course, is one of the biggest challenges inside of Russia as the Kremlin seeks to sever any ties between Russian civil society and activists and independent media and the people they're trying to reach. The fact that you're all gathered today in one location, I think, is an incredible opportunity to discuss a better future for Russia. And it's proof also, of course, that Putin's efforts to silence this community have essentially failed. As you acutely well know, engagement with those living inside the country is becoming even more difficult. But despite this, all of you are continuing to let other Russians know that they're not alone, that there are many who disagree with the war, who support human and civil rights and values, and who want a better future for Russia. We've seen over the past year that Putin's increasingly extreme policies are not supported by all in Russia, and his efforts to hide the truth are not succeeding. Many citizens of conscience have fallen victim to the brutality of Putin's growing repression, yet there are still millions of people in Russia who want to live in peace with their neighbors, who want to live in an open, secure, prosperous country, and where human rights and fundamental freedoms are represented. I think it's all up to all of us to carry the vision of a Russia that focuses on the well-being of its citizens rather than aggression against its neighbors. All of these activists, and I met so many of them, which was so impressive to me, they are starting to and have been articulating a long-term vision for a peaceful and prosperous Russia. I'm very hopeful, and I'll be listening to some of the panels today and tomorrow and the resulting discussions, which will be an important step. Holding and sharing opinions, disagreeing with the decisions of one's own government, these are all rights that are enshrined in both Russia's constitution and international law to which Russia is a party. To quote Vladimir Karamurza, who's currently in prison in Russia, speaking truth to power is the act of a patriot, not a traitor. Criminalizing criticism of government action is a sign of fear, not of strength. We at USAID, we stand with all of those and citizens of Russia who want to live in a stable and prosperous country at peace with its neighbors and open to the world, where human rights and civil rights are respected. It's just a real pleasure. I, of course, am of the firm view that we have and must continue to find creative ways to support those independent media, civil society, and activists that are active and increasingly vulnerable. And we at USAID are committed to do so, both in finding new ways of doing it in this panel and as we move forward. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Простите, я объединю.
I'm sorry, I will merge my two roles because there are 5 minutes remaining. And I really wanted to have enough time to give the floor to the audience, but my apologies. There was so many things that we had to say, and I have very simple considerations about how we can organize the strategy on communication to people in Russia. I'm not afraid to seem rough. I will just speak my mind. I don't really understand how in a situation when democratic institutions are fully destroyed, we can organize this communication without the only surviving and flourishing so far industry, which is called media. Ladies and gentlemen, as Muratov said in his Nobel Prize speech, we are the bridge, we are the channel bringing together politicians and their voters and their audiences. We are the people, the Russian journalists, we are the people who are capable of talking to millions. And this is why, in this country, where all democratic institutions are destroyed, we have very few opportunities for such strategic communications, which are awareness-raising educational projects, non-profit projects, and media projects, because we know our audience as our children. We can talk to them with empathy, with love to them, with understanding. At all platforms, each media outlet, we produce our own strategy. This is what Lev Ponomarev said. This is awesome. He came up with a recipe used by Russian propagandists. You remember that Russian state television, with their huge budget, they have one more silver bullet, which are great media managers. Yes, they are on the side of evil, but they were very talented. When they were producing great shows, and in the middle of these entertainment shows, they were immersing propaganda show, but we don't have to follow them. We should not copy-paste what they were doing. No, we have to organize our own strategy, and our strategy is exactly that media are the bridge between the politicians, opinion makers, opposition, celebrities, artists, literates, and the audience they want to reach. We are good in it. So the only thing for which I can call, let's not pretend that as our house is on fire, we'll just have to refurnish our windows. Let's build the fundamentals. The fundamental is about supporting media and educational projects. Yes, this is a long way. Sometimes people are laughing at me in Meduza. Do you have some other examples except Harry Potter? No. As Professor Dumbledore said, there is the easy way and the right way. The easy way, let's do something easy now, but the right way is to build institutional thing, to support institutional development, to support democratic institutions. So, roughly this is it.
Maybe the final remarks.
Спасибо большое, Галина. Точно высказала то, о чем, думаю, все думаем. Институциональная поддержка.
Thank you, Galina. You have mentioned the things that we have been talking about. The institutional support, this works, and building institutions, academic institutions, education, society, this is very important. But this requires the financing strategy, and here is a job for us, for the European Union, for USAID, and for other partners who treat this seriously. We should develop a long-term strategy of support. And here we also address our hosts, the European Parliament, to think about this, to think of how the existing budget to host this long-term financing and to ensure it on a large scale. Thank you. Well, I would like to echo this. I believe we should support diversity. There are various channels of communication and enlightenment channels, and definitely these are institutionalized media, but this includes social media, and this should be engaged when they close an opportunity to use YouTube and Telegram. Then well, certainly today these are the main channels today, but we should have a common response. But this is not only about working with the people abroad in Russia, but this is what Russian citizens can do in our country, like the anti-war initiative platform launched end of last year. It is almost formalized. It's working nicely on a daily basis. And there are thousands of people standing behind it. And in general, the anti-war democratic movement to gather momentum, we need many people to join. There should be a broad coalition. We lack academicians, scholars, etc. And the European Union should allocate hundreds of millions of euros. It seems a lot, considering how many billions we lost during the war because of the weapons, etc. This is very needed for Ukraine to be able to win and to secure it, but this add-on is important for other Russia to emerge, for this to be stronger, and we should support this duly. Thank you. You know what, since we talked a bit about communications, there's another idea, and it's a prerequisite for us to have a chance, maybe a small one, but still a chance for something to happen, for us to succeed in Europe, and we should be brave. The thing is that despite all horrible things committed under the name of our country, we have normal people, we have many good and people with dignity. We can be a normal country, and we should not be considered as doomed. Friends, I'm very happy that this is the note of our panel at the end. Our message from the European Parliament should reach the European Union for the hundreds of millions of euros to be allocated that we've mentioned. It's very important. Thank you. The last thing it was the least thing that I wanted this panel to end. I mean, money issue, but
not a state, but a state of mind. Let's convert it into genuine Russian democracy should be state of play. Don't give up, we will support you. Thank you.
Уступаем.